From gentrification to crime to land use, the zoning, those are some of the issues that Anthony G. Bryant has been fighting for years here in the city of Charleston. Today, I talk one-on-one with the land use and zoning advocate for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Anthony G. Bryant.
What's up, my brother? What's going on with you?
Welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
No doubt, my brother.
Yes, sir.
No doubt.
I know that obviously you are very well known here in Charleston.
I appreciate it.
As a land use and zoning advocate here in the city of Charleston.
No doubt.
When you look at what's going on right now, Mr. Anthony, what is the state of zoning and land use in the city of Charleston?
Ambler, Euclid versus Ambler Realty Company, 1928 is the source. Supreme Court. That's the premise of it, because again, in 1928, is a couple years before the Federal Fair Housing Act, Federal Housing Act, or Federal Housing Act, actually, under FDR.
Right.
And so that led to a lot of the land use issues as far as zonings, in terms of redlining, in terms of insurance redlining. So when our people got in office in the 70s, they were facing redlining. So a disservice to the council members who've been in the past is the fact that they did their part the best they could, but they had corporate interests totally against them. And so that's really the premise of the state of land use and zoning in Charleston is the fact that we came out of slavery with nothing, right? And so in order to be an American, you need land and access to capital. And we had no access to capital and land. So therefore we came out of slavery really American in name only.
Where's that capital and access right now, Mr. Anthony, here in the peninsula or in the rest of the city of Charleston?
I mean, it's access to capital, but you have to meet the criteria. If you make $51,000 in Charleston right now, you can't qualify for a house. Okay, in most cases, you can't rent. The magic number is $58,000 to $51,000. Now you got police officers, teachers who could own a house downtown 30, 40 years ago. Right. Need $60,000 in the school district budget in order to be able to purchase a home to live where they work at.
Wow.
So it really comes down again back to banking, comes back to insurance, comes back to that.
Where is the insurance redlining right now?
Well, I can't speak to insurance redlining specifically, but generally I would say it runs with the banks. How the banks lend, the insurance follows. Right. So a lot of people are underinsured in Charleston as well. Uninsured health-wise, uninsured home ownership, rental, everything, because again, the magic number is $51,000 to $58,000.
So who are these people who actually have the houses that actually make that type of money?
Well, Charleston is going into 30 people coming to Charleston a day, I was told. Right. So therefore, they coming in with skill set and talent. So you got skill set and talent, therefore you get paid more money. So you're coming into a market actually bringing people in to compete against people who they can't compete against at all in the first place. So therefore, they're the ones who get in the capital, coming in, whoever they are, coming in, getting the capital and investing in the marketplace and doing the things that they're doing.
What was the marketplace before this happened, and what is the marketplace obviously now?
Well, the marketplace, I would say back in the 1990s was affordable, right? Very affordable. 70s was very affordable.
Sure.
2008, after the Great Recession, I think that's when it happened, because a lot of people were just taken out of the market completely because of the market itself.
Yes, sir.
And I think that what we don't do is look at ourselves as being a part of the market. We look at ourselves as being outside of it. And we don't prepare our children in terms of meeting the economic criteria to participate in the marketplace. Education should be centered around market criteria, not criteria of voting specifically. You can vote at 18 years old. Sure. But you make under $51,000, you can't rent, you can't buy a house, you can't do anything economically. I think that we have to reverse that conversation and talk simply about the fundamentals of economics within our community. And I think that that's really a market. That's like a Federal Reserve decision. That's those are bigger issues. But we should be looking at the Federal Reserve. We should be looking at that on television. We should be looking at the South Carolina Senate and House. Right. Those subcommittees are very important. That's boring, but that's real. It's real tangible decisions in our day-to-day life. Right. So I think personally, that's what we have to do in order to be able to manifest something great for ourselves and for our community.
What was the market criteria in 2008 versus now?
The market criteria in 2008 was really a lot of capital coming into the market via these signature loans, the criteria of lapse, credit default swaps, all those market activities as far as on Wall Street affected Main Street. And so those criteria were loose. Now they blame African Americans and minorities for not being able to meet the criteria, and they defaulted on the loans. That's a big stereotypical misconception that's out there. African Americans were a part of the 1873 panic, right? That was during Lincoln. That's the first panic. Well, the first panic known to African Americans were about to become free. 1893 panic and the 1907 panic led to the Federal Reserve. Okay. So all these issues and macro issues play a major role in our micro lives. We try to act like it's discounted and we're not a part of that discussion. And what I'm trying to do as a community activist on the issue of land use and zoning is say, come to your meetings. Go to your zoning board meetings. We're at a lot of meetings, people don't even at the meetings at all. They have criticisms online and offline. We have to be at these meetings, the budget meetings and other meetings that are very important for our community.
What are the macro issues right now?
The macro issues right now, I would say, is just a disparity in income. Disparity in income is just there. You can't get around that. You have to have the skill set and talent in order to deal with those issues. I personally believe that that's the problem. It's that disparity is that great. And so if you live outside of a community, poverty is different than it was in 1970. Mm-hmm. Okay, you have the dynamics too, the war on drugs and poverty. The war on poverty came in the 1960s. That failed. The war on drugs, that failed. So therefore you have people that are not really productive in the marketplace at all because they just took themselves out of the market. So those are the macro issues I believe that still affect us this very day. These horrible crime bills that were passed by both parties, but in particular the Democratic Party. Okay, but Joe Biden authored the crime bill in 1994. Okay, that crime bill put so many people, African American males, in jail. Your head will spin. They're not productive. They can't be productive, and so therefore the Democratic Party is given some level of pass on these issues. The Republican Party has some issues as well with that too. Both of them do, but even right now they're still pushing those issues, absent the causation of why these things happen. Because the way the federal government looks at a lot of these issues is this: identify policy and practice at issue. They deal with disparities, causation, and adverse harm. Now, if you take out centuries of slavery, and you take out Jim Crow as a causation of the harm we face, then you've done a disservice to the whole country, in my opinion.
Now, going back to that crime bill from 1994, how many African American males are still in jail or prison because of this?
Lots.
How many in Charleston?
In Charleston, I couldn't give you that I wouldn't be a source to give to you. I can tell you that accurately what the number is. I like to give source material.
Sure.
I don't like to really just call out numbers and be smart. There's sources available. The Department of Corrections got sources. The Department of Justice got sources.
What source are you using?
The sources that I'm using from all my materials are direct government sources. Federal Reserve reports, HUD reports, Department of Agriculture reports. The reports are readily available to the public.
So what were those reports in 94?
The reports of 94 wouldn't be in the reports because it had to be the 86 crime bill. There's a crime bill in 1970, a crime bill in 86, and 94. I wouldn't know that because in 94 the bill was passed.
Now, obviously, if you look at those reports today, what's different from then to now?
None.
Still the same.
If not worse.
Wow.
If not, because we look at the fact that if you don't have the skill set and talent to apply for employment or a business license or whatever,
sure,
and you're totally taken out of the marketplace. That's what happened to us in 94. In 1994, you listen to all the hip hop rap music from 1980 to 1994 is public policy. Okay, it talks about what was really going on and still going on in our communities every day. So hip hop culture is public policy, in my opinion.
So what's that public policy to now associated with hip hop?
The public policy of hip hop is actually the disparities in education, disparities in the environment, water, sewer policies, the issue in terms of this perception of African American men and women being criminals. I mean, that's accurately what it's about, your perception and image of who you are as a person. And I think that we discount that perception. You walk into a room and you dress a certain way, what do you look like? What do you perceive as? And you're devalued at that point, or valued at that point.
So what are those, obviously, as you mentioned, those are perceptions right now.
Right. But they'll remain perceptions until we change those perceptions to the African Americans. It comes upon us to have a certain value system that we need to have, present ourselves in that way, and have our own standards we have to deal with.
What is that system now, Mr. Anthony?
What's that system now? I couldn't tell you. I logically couldn't tell you what somebody else thinks, or arguably what a group thinks, but I can say what I believe. What I believe basically is we have to go back to the old standards of our community on the value side, in terms of values, in terms of our presentation of ourselves, in terms of our faith systems, in terms of those things that make us individually unique and better, like yourself. Okay, so you can't put yourself in an aggregate. You only see things from an individual perspective. I think too many times as African Americans, we think too collectively. and we have to be in line with collective points of views. And in all actuality, now everybody plays the trumpet like Louis Armstrong. I play like Quintin Marcellus. I play the piano Ahmad Jamal. I mean, so we have to get back to developing our individual self instead of looking at the whole all the time. This is a one-on-one conversation between you and I, right? We're talking to two African American men from Charleston on a spring day. I gotta say, on a spring day, in 1868, on a spring day, we're doing the Constitution in South Carolina, right? The public education.
Yes, sir.
Right? And I'm a lay person. I'm not a scholar.
Right.
But what I would say is it's important that we understand the importance of our individual self.
What should be those importance right now?
What should be the importance right now? I would always say is education. But I would always say education is first, and then self-education as well. I don't think that some things you have to learn on your own. You go to the library, get a library card, and that's the purpose of my life. Basically, studying everything you can study, learn what you can learn, and then our presentation as far as our dress. You know, I mean, I think we got to go back to some standard of dress within our community, and also our communication with each other, being responsible and reasonable discussion between each other. I think that's important. We become very reckless. We become very irresponsible in our communication with each other. Then we have to deal with those value systems, I think, again.
And what should be those value systems for communication?
I think the communication should basically be respectful. We have to have a criteria of respect. That's got to be a discussion. What is an argument? What's a debate? What's a discussion? I mean, we have to define what those things are before we even speak to each other. Right now, you and I have a criteria of talking, a method of talking, and how we're going to convey this out to the public is really important. And I want you to know that I appreciate you, giving me this opportunity to do this morning.
Oh, absolutely. You talk about, obviously, the dynamics of education, but what are those dynamics of poverty associated with COVID and social media?
The issue with social media is the fact that people are smarter than you think they are. Okay, I don't think people are that naive as we make it. I think people who put things out on social media know what they're doing. I think that we have to do our own research on our own and come with source materials online. A lot of times when I use social media, I use source materials to support my positions. I don't just put an opinion out there absent of it. But what I would say in terms of COVID was that we were already behind the 8 ball anyway in terms of education. It just exacerbated what we already knew already. Okay, we already knew that we had a lot of issues. We didn't know strictly what those issues were. And in particular, in terms of the assembly of discussion of education with the critical race theory argument and other arguments. For the record, it was a survey done, I'm going to get that survey to you, that the average American citizen didn't know much about American history anyway. So why would it be an issue if the average American citizen don't know much about history in the first place? So why is it an argument? Second reason why it should be an argument is an assembly question, and the fact that if you assemble people together and they're not an adult, then their parents have to be involved in terms of what they'll be learning. I think it's an assembly question more so than anything else.
And let me ask you this, Mr. Bryant, as we sit here right now, what are the hidden histories that we don't know about today?
I think I wouldn't want to cheat people out of doing their own homework, right? If it's hidden, find it. If it's hidden to you, find it. It's incumbent upon you to say, I don't know what this is. What is this? And then do your own homework in terms of finding what it means to you. There's too many times people give you information absent of giving you the real sources of what you specifically want. You may not want 10 things. You may just want one and build a 10. You may want all 10, but it's incumbent upon you to make that decision. I personally believe in individual responsibility. I personally believe in people having the right to think for themselves. I subscribe to free thought. Free thought basically is that. I did a public comment recently on faith-based organizations and popular faith-based organizations and how they become direct lobbyists over state budgets, county budgets. If you don't believe, or if you don't go to church, or if you go to brunch, or whatever, that's your business. But when people get into the fact of trying to shape policy, your taxpayers' money around their point of view, to me, it's unconstitutional.
What is their point of view of this community today?
Their point of view of this community today is that we once were here. You got a living history in Charleston. We're building $100 million museum, $100 million museum. Around the corner, Union Pier is going to take place. Union Pier is going to take place. That's billions of dollars. It's a non-performing asset. It was just used for industrial purposes of the state. Once converted over, it's worth billions of dollars. Now land use deals with income producing property, deals with market approaches for rental real estate. and you got a comparable point of view. Well, the bottom line with that planned unit development is going to be in the billions. Now, what happened in the city of Charleston? The first house sold in Charleston for $1 million in the 1980s.
Right.
So you look at that comparable, and now if you got a house going for $200,000 on the east side, $400,000 on the east side, you don't make enough money to buy that house, you're out. So it's a lot of blatant, flat out lies taking place in terms of the impacts of land use and zoning on everyday folk. Rent's going to go up higher. The Union Pier issue is an issue that's really well thought out. It's being rushed right now, in my opinion. I think that with the $3 billion, it's very controversial probably, with the $3 billion, the comptroller misguided the public for a decade. Now, if you and I misguided the government for a day, we'd be in jail. $3 billion for a decade, and a comptroller, nothing's going to happen to him. Nothing. What message that's in our young people of $3 billion? And now the Ports Authority and other people who use the fact that we had a $3 billion savings, whatever we had for a decade, how does that affect 526? How does that affect Union Pier? How does that affect every aspect of every county budget, every city budget at $3 billion? Plus, that's ARPA money and CARES Act funding to tie with that. This is a major issue for those who are poor.
Now, how much CARES money went to this?
I don't know. See, because it's mismanaged. I mean, it's okay. Not mismanaged.
Okay.
I would say they found an error. Right at this point, it was a subcommittee. And you look at the Senate. It was a subcommittee done by somebody. The subcommittee actually dealt with the issue in terms of the comptroller's error, right? And so it's got a subcommittee report going out. Right. I hope that everybody listening to this asks the senator for a copy of that subcommittee report. And that's going to tell us, well, how every aspect of our lives are going to turn out in the state of South Carolina with $3 billion, right? And so look at all the people that have gone to jail in South Carolina for less than $3 billion. That's a real issue, right? If you went to jail for $1,000 and someone went to jail for $3 billion, they go home to their family.
What other errors do you think happened that we don't know about?
I think, well, for example, the FOIA
Right.
aspect. I do a lot with the Freedom of Information requests in terms of Administrative Procedure Act, which is notice, which is procedure to public hearing. You make your public comments, and then the effective date, the final rule. Then it's administered by the rule makers.
Yes.
And then you've got that. Well, if you even look at this issue in terms of the police departments and their funding with $3 billion. And in America, 18,000 departments in America, 18,000. 600,000 police officers with about, combined with federal and agencies, which, definitely affect our community a whole lot in the past 50 years. They're talking about they're being defunded. Frankly, never was funded in the first place. So the argument in terms of defund the police is another ludicrous argument because they're not funded anyway. The average police officer can't even live in the city of Charleston, in the peninsula of Charleston. Right. So that's not on the proponents or opponents of the issue. That's on the government who has the budget.
Where is the accountability?
I don't think it's it. I think it's when you do a FOIA request, you have exemptions in the FOIA request. Right. In most cases, for a layperson, not for the media. Right. And I'm a big journalist. I'm big for journalism. I'm big. Herb Fraser. Yes. Tony Bottom. Sure. Scholar Croft. Sure. They're the experts in that area. Right, yourself.
Thank you.
I think too many people don't respect journalism. I think we had a lot of money for journalism. It's a donation to the Post and Courier's Guide. I encourage people to put money in that donation pool because the journalists have to take the time to look at all the documentation. So you know how much that costs? 50 cents a copy. Right. So you're talking about we got like 10,000 copies at 10 cents or 50 cents, right? That's a lot of money. So I would say not the cover up per se, but I'd say the cover up per se would be that the cost of all of to find out what things are or aren't. All the major stories have done around the country have cost a lot of money to the news the media outlets. And now with the rating issue, with certain people want to get ratings, and journalism, I think has been kind of hurt with that. Okay. As opposed to having the right to just go ahead and probably got the right to know. I think that individuals need to get because identity theft too, you need to get their FOIA requests on their personal information every year too. There's a lot of these so-called scam issues. The question becomes, the FCC 230 basically it gives third parties a right to be exempted from their activities online. Right now, you got companies over the world. So when they put these things out about, I'm like, what are you doing? You don't have any control over the internet. They don't. The FCC does and doesn't either. So I think that there's a lot of misconceptions in terms of what power people have and don't have.
Well, let me ask you this, Mr. Anthony. Going back to the police budget and the funding right now, what exactly is that in the city of Charleston?
The budgets normally take up about, I'd say, over 50% of the overall budget, and in some cases maybe 80% of the budget, and then the rest goes to everybody else. So you got aggregate number 80 at 100%, then you got maybe 30% goes to everything else. Well, I think the issue with that is depends on the cost of living. You live in an area that's very expensive. The fund the police issue is not an issue of opponents of police practices, right? Opponents of police practices. It's really an issue of the city you work in, and if your city is not putting money in your pocket in terms of your wages and your insurance policies, whatever you have for your family, okay, that's on them. That's not on those who go against your methods of applying force on people. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the city of Charleston, the county, or whoever you work for, not operating in good faith in terms of their priorities. If you got incentives going out to Boeing and Volvo and all these incentives, meaning they don't pay no taxes.
Right.
Right. So I mean, they'll take some senior citizen's house, but don't think about it. Now Boeing won't get nothing taken. They won't get a plane taken. They won't get nothing taken. Right. So there's no confiscation of Volvo cars or nothing. So at the end of the day, you as a taxpayer, if you don't pay your tax, they'll take your car, they'll take your house, they'll take everything from you, they'll let the corporations move forward.
So what exactly are their priorities then?
Again, that's what we're having this conversation. I'm just trying to figure that out.
And Mr. Tony, I got a few minutes left, but I want to talk to you obviously about that area you just mentioned, the International African American Museum and the Union Pier, really all in the same vicinity.
Right.
But when you go back, and I've done my research on this, going back to the early 90s, there was an article in the paper which Mayor Riley in the city of Charleston basically said, hey, the land is contaminated around the Washington Street area. Now, when you go back there, you see the International African American Museum back there, parks and condos. When you look at that, what sticks in your mind?
In the early 1970s, Richard Nixon did the EPA. The EPA was really done to mitigate corporations' losses and lawsuits. Right, so Nixon was a great Chamber of Commerce lawyer. Okay, so Riley comes from the history of the Chamber of Commerce. So John Tecklenburg and all the rest of them. So the issue is, how can we find a reason to do something else? Okay, and so you have to prove the fact that creosote is there. You know the cost it takes for us to prove the fact that we have to get all kind of experts, spend all kind of money in order to deal with that issue. So they know the cost of making that argument will cost too much money. So therefore, what happened was they were able to do what they wanted because the opposition didn't have any money to stop it. Same with Union Pier. The opposition didn't have enough money to take on the State Ports Authority. It's going to cost money to take State Ports Authority on the Department of Commerce. They got the full faith and credit of the state of South Carolina, if not the United States government, with Biden's a big supporter of the port. Marlon Kempson now leaving a district that probably won't exist in 2024. Okay, look at the result. Look at the zone. We don't have a representative in that area at all. Okay, so basically what's going to happen is he's working with Biden, in my opinion, to help them move us out.
I tried to get him on Quintin's close ups, but apparently he didn't have time from what I was told according to the email.
He might find some now, but for the most part is the Clyburn's trip began in 1990.
Right.
He had the whole peninsula. And look at his district now. Okay, so the peninsula loses because of largesse of political influence by Clyburn's office and others. So I know it's unpopular. I'm from the peninsula, not Clyburn. I mean, he got a lot of friends in the peninsula. You from the peninsula, I'm from the peninsula. So the peninsula, my generation believes, I don't know what your generation believes, actually for mine, some of us believe that we were really not treated with a lot of respect in terms of that new seat, 1990. That seat was supposed to protect the peninsula and protect North Charleston and protect black folk. That district was about black people. If he says it's not about black people, it's about everybody else, then he could have ran and kept losing like he's losing before in general elections.
Well, who's protecting these people now?
We got to protect ourselves by filing complaints, by going to meetings, by being involved, and organizing ourselves to protect ourselves, to mitigate something from Union Pier. We got to mitigate something from Union Pier. It's got to be some level of serious money coming from the ports and Department of Economics development for our community. Have to.
And I would love to continue this conversation, but the battery's running out of time.
I got you, brother.
But Anthony G. Bryant, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome to Quintin's Close Ups.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Thank you.